Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast, is for anyone interested in leadership and the wins, losses, and lessons of being an executive. We are two women who have successfully navigated C-Suite roles and are sharing our experiences. We will be bringing on guests to tell their stories and want to spark honest conversation and discussion, which may include swearing and lots of laughs. Join us on this adventure.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Secrets of the C-Suite. We are so happy you are here. I'm Susan Sutherland, and I'm with Juliette Clothier. We're your hosts for Secrets of the C-Suite. We have a great episode coming today, but before we dive in, we just want to take a minute to thank you, our listeners, for following us, for listening to our podcasts, for please giving us a great review so other people can find us. We have loved our journey on this podcast, and this season is primarily focused on entrepreneurs. So each season we take a different sort of approach to thinking about leadership and the C-suite. And with that, I'm going to introduce Juliette, who is right here with me. Good morning, Juliette.
Good morning, Susan. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to see you again.
Yes, this is fun.
Yeah.
We forgot something. So
we did, and I keep interrupting you. You mentioned that you had a really amazing weekend, and I thought it would be helpful to our listeners for you to describe some of the high points of your weekend and what you learned from it. Because as you shared it with me, it really sparked some thoughtfulness about engagement and community and maintaining our sanity in these interesting times.
Definitely. Sanity, so important. I went to the movies on Friday night, which I haven't done in a very long time. And I saw Downton Abbey, which is extremely silly and has no bearing on anything, which was the perfect thing to watch. But moreover, it was about going to the movies. And we don't do that anymore. We tend to stream. We think it's better, right? We think it's better to stay home and do it. We don't have to pay. It's much cheaper, blah, blah, blah. But I'm telling you that 2.5 hours sitting in a movie theater without looking at my phone or hearing noise except for what was on the screen it was a great escape, I have to say. And I felt energized by it just because I was being entertained and had no participation. I didn't have to do anything. I just sat there. Yeah. And that was my requirement. And so that was good.
There's also that part that I think I know I've forgotten because I really stayed away from going to the movies, is the community of being in a dark room with all these people you don't know enjoying the same thing. And there's an energy that comes from that.
Yeah. And I think I told you I'm doing reviewing for the Sebastopol Documentary Film Festival. So I watched over 40 films this summer. Those are not escapes. Those are hard topics, a lot of topics about war and violence and just sad things. And so going to a movie as light as Downton Abbey was definitely a relief. How about you?
Yeah. I had an interesting weekend. My husband was away. And so I decided I was going to do all the things. And by Friday, I was like, I'm going to catch up on all my behind work. I'm in a coaching certification program, so I have to finish all my homework because I'm behind on my homework, and I have a lot of things for clients I haven't done. And I was going to get really good sleep and take naps, and I was going to exercise, and I was going to put order in the house in every room. And needless to say, I caught up a little bit on the homework. I had really good sleep. And I realized the most important thing I did for myself this weekend was to get out. It was a beautiful weekend here in the city, and I moved. And my body's tired, but I moved. I went for a long walk on Saturday, basically at the sea level. And then on Sunday, I went up and down Potrero Hill, which really kicked my ass. So I'm feeling like, why do I do that? Why do I do that multiplier effect? Like I'm gifted an hour or two, and I think I can do all the things in that hour or two. And then I'm disappointed when I don't. So I'm trying to not be disappointed that my weekend was the way it was, because the main thing I did was move and remember that I actually have a vessel and I need to care for it. So yeah, it's interesting. Weekends sometimes are fodder for reflection, and sometimes they just weekends. So it sounds like both of us had fodder. Yeah.
Definitely. With that, I'm going to introduce our guest. I am so excited that we have Teja Smith here with us. She is the CEO and founder of Get Social, a Los Angeles-based digital strategy and social media agency specializing in advocacy, culture, and impact-driven storytelling. With more than a decade of experience at the intersection of social justice, politics, and pop culture, Teja has built a reputation for designing digital-first campaigns that mobilize communities and elevate underrepresented voices. Through Get Social, she has helped organizations transform complex issues into culturally resonant narratives. Under her leadership, the agency has shaped the digital voice of national leaders and campaigns, including Rock the Vote, One Fair Wage, Hip Hop Caucus, She the People, See Us Unite, Schools Not Prisons, the Conrad Prebys Foundation, and many more. On a personal note, Teja is also the granddaughter of Carol Watson, a mentor who profoundly influenced my own journey. Carol dedicated a life to advancing social justice and addressing systemic inequities, from food deserts and financial illiteracy to barriers in education and the absence of multi-generational wealth in communities of color. She taught me to recognize my own privilege and inspired me through her tireless work to look for opportunities in my career that create meaningful change. It's an honor to welcome Teja today, not only as a leader in her own right, but also as someone carrying forward a legacy of impact. Welcome, Teja.
Oh, thank you so much for that intro. That was special. But thank you guys for having me. This is really great. I'm happy to be here.
So happy to have you. Yeah, this is awesome. So the first question I ask often is, tell us about your journey. How'd you get here? And how did you come to start Get Social? I love this.
You know, that is my favorite question because most people know me as a planner and I'm like, well, I have this and I want to do this and this is how I'm going to do it. And Get Social just came because it was needed. I really had no super thought out vision for it, but I knew that there was something that I wanted to do. And just as you spoke about my grandmother, even getting into social justice work and being socially aware was just invested in me from day one. As a little girl, I remember going to vote with my mom and my grandma, obviously before I could vote, and going to all of these fundraisers and galas and things that my grandmother was speaking at, and the impact of knowing the nonprofit space was just somewhere that I was. It wasn't really taught to me. It wasn't explained to me. It's just literally somewhere that I was. So growing up, I was always a little bit more socially aware than a lot of my friends. And I kind of realized that in college when I moved away from them and away from Oakland, Bay Area, to move to Los Angeles. And I was like, wow, you guys don't know anything about anything that's going on in like the news cycle and stuff like that. And I really just naturally gravitated towards that because, you know, as we have seen leading up to 2016, things were just getting weird. And I was like, I think things are getting actually very weird. And I really want to go move towards that space. I went to college to become a publicist. And upon graduating, I absolutely hated it. And so quickly, I was like, I like the idea of PR, but I really noticed a switch to social media happening before it was monetized and before there was an influencer. And I remember telling my then boyfriend, now husband, I was like, I really want to do social media work and like be a social media manager. And he was like, great, whatever that means. Okay. And so I did that. And here I am today with almost over 10 years in the digital, workspace. I got into social media, but I got into it on the social justice side. My first really national campaign was Schools Not Prisons, which was supposed to be a California-based idea. We did a 10-stop tour through different prisons and different communities to talk about the schools to prison pipeline. And I blew it up. It is still a standing podcast. It's still a standing brand to this day. Something no one ever expected from that tour and from everything that I did. So fast forward to that, from that work and opening my agency, maybe about 5 years after really getting into social justice, it was the pandemic really that pushed me. I had a decision, I was on my own. I was doing freelance work and I was getting a few more clients and I was like, okay, I'm going to start needing an assistant, somebody to help me with some work. I got that, I'm still to this day so lucky to have her. She came in and helped me. This was maybe January, February 2020. And by April, pandemic completely shut us down. But with that, I started to get a few more clients and things were ramping up because people didn't know how to tell people about COVID-19 and explain these matters and issues about why quarantining is important and what it does to your health. And then we have a huge election that is a turning point. There was so much going on. And then when George Floyd was murdered, that was the pivotal moment when I really had to make the decision, like, I can keep ignoring work, or I can create somewhere, an agency that I would like to work, something that I would like to see happen, and uplift women that I believe are left out of the social justice conversation so much, finally have a voice. Because something I really realized in social justice and in social media, like everything, it's very white male dominated. And I couldn't believe that, because I was like, most of the issues happening in America impact women, and then women of color specifically. So the fact that we were just being completely shut out of it made me want to create a space where it was just us, so we can talk about all of these issues and put women's rights at the forefront and be comfortable at the workplace. And from that, it was like, okay, well, let's just do Get Social with Teja, because I was like, I'll just have a couple of help, a little bit of people until the election, and now here I am 5 years later.
It's so great. I mean, you know, it's that finding a need and filling it, but it's such a huge need. And one of the things that I loved, I listened to your TED Talk, which your grandmother was so proud of. She was just so excited, and I had a call with her a couple months before it was going to drop. And she just, I mean, you were everything to her, and this was just your moment. And it was such a great talk. And the couple things I took out of it that were surprising to me and not surprising, Black women are tired of saving this country. And I think we really need that. I want our listeners to really absorb that. 91% of Black women who voted supported a Democratic candidate. That's not the problem.
Exactly.
You know, they're doing their part. What's wrong with the rest of us?
Yeah, and you know, that was a lot of when you go into your TED Talk, there's a lot of things that you're like, oh yeah, TED Talk, you probably have a prompter, you probably have this, and they're like, no, you have to memorize it. No, you're completely writing it yourself. And I was like, oh. So that process really made me realize what my message has kind of been all along. I had so many ideas, so many things I wanted to talk about. And when I really started forming it, I was realizing that, like, we do everything. We're at the forefront of these movements. We're creating Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement. Nobody remembers Me Too movement was started by a Black woman. You know, we're putting our necks out there to run for president, someone very overly, highly qualified. People are, you know, questioning her Blackness, questioning her journey, questioning who she did what to get to where. And it's just like all of these other white men completely filling up time after time again. And what you're questioning are the very basic things that are a Google search that can let you know that this is not only a woman of color, a Black woman who identifies as a Black woman, who went to Howard University and exudes her Blackness as an AKA, all of these things. And here we are debating her against someone who is not qualified at all, never has been.
Exactly, 100%. That was just so stark. And I think the other message that I pulled out of that I believe in wholeheartedly, if we all vote, we win, right? And we don't all vote. And one of the things you said in that TED Talk as well, which was vote in every election. And why don't we vote?
Absolutely. I think I've made that like my life mission at this point. Because as I started to get older and really realize that my peers were just like completely out of the loop of voting, like it wasn't even on their radar. And, you know, even growing up for me, when I started to get my right to vote, it was during the Obama election, which is like every young Black girl's dream to start voting and be able to be voting for our first Black president. But that is what got the Black community really integrated in it. But then at the same time, they were like, well, we only vote on a president. And it was like, well, no, because voting on a local level is actually way more impactful than voting for just a president and worrying about it every 4 years. And, you know, it's a gift and a curse of what social media has brought us, because it's brought in the scrutiny, it's brought out the bad side, but it also brought out so much awareness and people having their own platform and having their own voice, which again, good and bad. But it brought us there to where people are paying attention. And, you know, a lot of people are seeing the repercussions of this past election and realizing, oh, me not showing up also was not voting, or me not voting also did create a lot more issues than I thought, because, there's also, when we're in California, you're like, oh, they've got it. It's like they're still voting for your sheriff who puts ICE in your community and pushes for deportation. You have to vote on that person because that trickles down to your community. Voting on judges, voting on so many other things that are just out of sight, out of mind to people. But it's also the shape of America. It's built and made for us not to pay attention and not to be worried about it so they can flow how they want to. But in this time and day, it's so important that we really pay attention and actually get out and vote, because there's one thing to pay attention and there's one thing to actually get out there and, make a change.
Well, I'm tempted to ask a really big, impossible question, or maybe it's more of a comment, which and you sit at the intersection of what I've observed, but you're a force for good, which is that the internet there's so much vitriol and it's so much noise in people's head. I was reading something yesterday about how scrolling actually wrecks your brain. There's a center in your brain that it deteriorates, right? How do you navigate the vitriol and the current moment and retain your vision for what's good about social media and what's good about America?
That's an amazing question, because people ask me that all the time. Just like you guys talking about self-care, and people are like, how do you sift through all of this? And I'm like, I honestly don't know. It is truly one of those things of me blocking things out and me realizing, I know I have a really great gift with being in social media for so long, because there's so much comparisons and so many things that come up on your feed that make you question yourself and question what you're doing. And because I know the ins and out of it, I know how to block it out. Positivity goes a long way, but some people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you follow this blog. And I'm like, I get the negativity of it, but I also need to stay abreast and need to stay aware of what's going on. So I look at everything as that it's just news. Even though it's bad news, it's like I have to know about it. There's been times where I log on and I see a Black man being murdered on Facebook Live and not realizing that that's what I signed up to look for, signed up to look at. And it's impacted in my brain. It's invested in my brain now. But I think my outlet for it is pushing for the change, for things to happen, and making sure people are aware where they don't have to, visually see something. But it's also humanizes people, I think, because something I talked about recently with a friend was about Rodney King and the brutal beating of him. That
1993.
1993, I was 3 years old. I know about it. I know when it happened. I know what the recording looked like. But TV only showed you so much. With the grittiness and the grality of that you see now in today's time, it gets people riled up. It makes people pissed off. People were pissed back then about Rodney King, but imagine if Rodney King happened in today's time too. It would be 20 times bigger, just as, the murder of George Floyd. So again, I know that social media has done a lot of harm, but for me, it's done so much good that I look at it that way. It also has catapulted a nonprofit that I'm starting called the Digital Justice Lab, that what I want to do is train young people in the understanding that there is a good side to social media. There is something that you can get the best work out of it with your advocacy and your voice and using it, and how to use AI to your advantage, because that's the next sector that nobody's really prepared for. The deep fakes, the everything that's about to come out with AI, and how we can better use it for good and advance ourselves, and how to spot misinformation and spot when something is not real.
Wow.
I think that's the number one thing to be taught in. I'm working in a high school right now as a chief financial officer in a private independent high school. There's a lot of privilege there, and they really work on kind of developing the whole kid, which is great. And I think they're doing some great stuff, like no phones during the day, those types of things. But the class that I think is the most important class to be taught to kids today is how to disseminate, how to find what's fact, and spend that extra 15 minutes before you form an opinion to make sure that you're reading something that has facts in it. And I think I'm a victim of it as well. I tend to watch MSNBC, and I love my people there, but I'm getting opinions about opinions, right? I'm not always getting the actual facts. And, you know, I think that is what young people can do. They can learn that to make a difference.
Teja, you mentioned in passing when you were talking about using the internet for good and managing yourself in that process, that you have started or are starting a new nonprofit called Digital Justice Lab. And I would like you to say more about that. I think our listeners need to know more about that. Where are you in the process of formation and how's it going?
Yeah, I literally just got this all done and finally planned throughout the summer. It's been something that's on my mind really since my TED Talk about misinformation and disinformation, because that's what my TED Talk was about. The misinformation spewing and how Black women show up, and misinformation won an election based off of nothing that was factual. So with that, Digital Justice Lab really was a passion idea that I've always had in the back of my mind. And with the movement of AI going where it's going, I think everyone is talking about AI in a negative manner, which I do understand, but at this point it's here to stay. And I would rather start educating people on how to use it for good causes and to their advantage instead of telling them not to use it and helping them pass college. So I am, when I see college kids and think about the way they're using AI, and I'm like, wow, we are going to need some literacy because it spews everything out to them. It's scary. But I am in fundraising mode. I just really hit the ground running with everything. We are in the startup mode, and I am planning to launch it in 2027. Really is going to be production. What I plan to do is to hold workshops in small communities for teens and early college students, because I don't want them to feel like it's too late once they get to college, and host workshops on what social media is, how to work it, and everything down to how to spot misinformation, how to vet a news article, how to understand the works of Twitter/X, and now that people have blue check marks of it not being a verified person and probably someone just engagement farming, which people just aren't really aware of, and really helping kids understand the ins and outs of the tactics shown on social media these days.
Yeah. So your workshops, will they be virtual or in person in community?
We're doing in person. I think virtual will always come as we start to grow, because we can only be in so many places at one time. I want to start this in California, since we do have laws that protect us against a lot of the idea kind of brainchild is to start it in California, and really then not necessarily focus on national big cities, but focus on southern states. That is where people do not have the biggest access to the internet, to resources, to information. And they are the ones who are in extremely red states getting fed information that they don't know is true or not. So I really want to take it to a lot of HBCUs and starting and go the school route in colleges and in high school campuses, and try to make it as nonpartisan as possible and really just give the information that I think people need to make their own opinionated judgment.
Yeah. Wow. That's such a great vision. 2027.
Yeah. It sounds far,
but no, it's going to be here just like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so exciting. I definitely want to hear more about that. As I said, I'm working in a high school right now, and I think it would be a really valuable thing to be able to bring to high schools and college. I think it should be a freshman college required course. Sounds amazing. Just
absolutely
amazing.
Digital literacy 101. It's funny because as much as I said, I didn't plan a lot of things with my agency. One thing I've always said was I was in social media. I was like, well, one day I think when I retire, I'll become like a professor and teach digital literacy and when during this time. And I'm already leaning towards that now with this nonprofit idea.
Yeah, you're needed now, Teja. Don't wait. Don't wait on that one for sure.
What's striking to me about your work, Teja, is it's so diversified. Like your audiences and your causes, like you have a central point, right? You're a digital media guru, for lack of a better word. Like you're really good at helping causes and campaigns. But the causes you support, while they fall under a pretty big umbrella, are also pretty diverse, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So why would you limit yourself to being a professor when you're retired, when you can maybe do that now while you do other things?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because sometimes I think about it. Like, I have a 3-year-old, so I'm also like, woo, like, so, last year I spread myself thin. I think in 1 month I was in 6 different states doing a lot of, digital literacy work. And honestly, I'm really just now coming out of my bubble because the first half of this year I was just like, I'm tired still.
Yeah.
I'm spent, and I want to just enjoy the fruits of my labor and wake up to my son every morning consistently because, I was in and out and flying everywhere. But those are the ideas that I'm like, yes, because I can do everything and I want to do everything. But also realizing that I'm 34 and I'm like, I'm still very young and I need to do it now.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. How do you manage the competing priorities like your 3-year-old son, who you clearly love and want to spend time with, and these passions that you have for your work? And I assume your husband's in there somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. One, marrying a great person, an actual father, an actual dad, someone that shows up without me having to ask. I think that was probably one of our biggest shockers when having our son, of just people that we know that were like, oh, you're a super dad. And he was like, I'm literally just being a parent. Like, thank you, but these are just normalcies around here. But my husband is amazing. He has just been, I can't even put it into words. And him and my son's bond is so strong. Also, with a lot of the traveling, they've been able to spend so much time together too. Another really amazing thing about owning your own agency is being able to bring your son to things, which has been great. My son's been to DC. He got to see me work, got to see me on stage. I've taken him to a few panels, a few appearances. Even for my TED Talk, he wasn't there during it, but he came to the after party. It's one thing that I think I mimicked from my grandmother. My grandma took me to everything. And I learned how to be well behaved. I learned how to sit in my seat. I learned how to sit at a table with grown people and mind my business and eat my food and enjoy what was going on. And my son is definitely feeling all of that very early on. We just got back from a cruise that we took down the French Riviera. We went to Nice, Portofino, Rome, and Florence. And he was an angel on a 9-hour time difference. And he was like, yeah, this is a life for me. I can do this. I can adjust quickly. And I was like, you know what? You can.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
When you were talking about normal parenthood, as you describe your husband, he's just being a dad. Like, I wonder if there's a campaign in there somewhere with you and your husband around norms and expectations, because so many entrepreneurial women who have families still carry that extra burden of more than 50% of household and family support. So anyway, I'm rooting for you.
Thank you.
So one of the questions we always ask is, what's the biggest secret? What was the biggest surprise about kind of becoming the CEO of your own business?
Taxes.
That's an honest truth. There's an honesty there. Yep.
That is 100% the biggest. Having your taxes and having a good accountant in order when you're paying people. It's complex. When you go from the one being paid and you're getting paid every 2 weeks and going from the one that's, putting food on people's table for them. Like, you can't miss a payroll. You can't mismanage money. And in the nonprofit space, as most of you guys know, clients like to pay in 3 months. And it's like, where's that money coming from? Who has that in between money and, saving up? And the thing about my agency, it's all been self-funded. I've never taken a loan. I've never gotten any grants. I've never done any of that. So all of this has been self-done by myself, which is great because if tomorrow I decided to close, I have no ties to anyone and I can close. But it also, when I tell people that, they're like, you haven't gotten any grants? And I'm like, no, because during COVID and everything, it was nonprofits that were getting all of that work and getting all of those grants. So that is probably the biggest thing. I always tell people when they're becoming an entrepreneur to think about their sector and their pivot into a nonprofit, because even with the Digital Justice Lab, it's essentially another fold of Get Social, but just on the nonprofit sector, so I don't have to worry about taxes again.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
May
You
I
still have
ask
to
you-
worry about taxes. You still have to worry about taxes, but it's a little different. It doesn't keep you up at night as much.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can I ask you a nuts and bolts question about your business as an entrepreneur? Because I'm always fascinated by this when I talk to other people, because Juliet's an entrepreneur and I'm an entrepreneur, even though we do different things in our lives. Do you pay yourself a salary?
I do. I do pay myself like a small salary, really just to like cover benefits and all of the other things that come with, in California, you have to pay 401k and give health benefits and stuff like that. So I do, but I also get a lot of income from my outside appearances. I do a lot of panels, a lot of other podcasts, a lot of appearances, and sometimes even like Essence Fest 2 years ago called me to do a specific job. I brought my team, but I got paid. We did something for my team and then something paid directly just for me. So there's a twofold in there that I do have, but I take a very low salary just to cover kind of basic expenses.
Okay. And how big is your team?
We are 8 strong right now.
Wow. That's amazing. That's so cool. Great. From the one assistant that you got on board, not so. And
at one point, we were about, when it was not last year's election, but maybe in 2022, we were about 11, 12.
That's so great. That's
so
great.
It sounds like also around elections, maybe you expand a little bit, take on some extra help, and then, accordion style.
Yeah, last year we beef up on kind of like we have like a certain amount of interns that are like research interns, content creators making TikToks. That's the one thing I definitely lean into with Gen Z. I know I can make a good TikTok. I like to call myself a little actress, but I definitely get the younger girls to come in during election season to just give that level of perspective that I don't have.
Yeah, so not warm to TikTok yet. Sorry,
no,
go ahead.
Either. I'm slow on it. Although I think I told you my father became a TikTok sensation overnight. It's so funny. Anyway, longer story. I'll put the link to that specific TikTok in the show notes just for fun because it was pretty cute. Anyway, Teja, tell us a story, if you don't mind, from one of the campaigns that you've worked on and lessons you learned just navigating some of the personalities and the issues that came up. And I think our listeners would really love something from one of those experiences.
Yeah, the unique thing about what I do, because when I moved to LA, it was like, oh yeah, like everyone, I want to work with celebrities. And then I started working with celebrities as a publicist, and I was like, wow, I hate this. But so coming over into the social justice side and working with celebrities in the capacity that I do, I absolutely love it because it's something they care about. For instance, one campaign that I worked on during Schools Not Prisons actually was with singer Miguel. And we went to a immigration detention center in Adelanto, California, where he performed in front of it as a call out to release people from this prison. And we were calling to shut it down. But it was really special because his parents immigrated here. So the story was just very near and dear for him because, this could have been his parents. This could have been him. He could have been born in a detention center. Or a detention prison is what we actually call them. So I really like to see when people take away the artistry and take away their sense of entitlement for that moment to just connect with the people on the ground. He met with a lot of young people in the area, some people that were recently let out of the prison, of the detention prison, and integrating back into the community. And this was back again in 2016, 17. So I can only imagine kind of what a story like that means to him today. And even during this time, taking in Pusha T inside of a prison who had a lot of friends, family, etc., growing up in a prison and, in and out of prison his entire life and going back in there and performing for people of his peers and telling them, that they can do other things after, that there's afterlife. And when you make mistakes, that there's still, even while you're in there, to make good and do good. So those are always the stories that I like to share, because even during 2020, everything was digital, but I produced a few online events, CS Unite, which was on VH1 and MTV, where we were calling for the kind of the mending and binding of Asian and Black community with all the divide that was going on with COVID, and showing the solidarity that has been there for time and time and time again for decades. So just some of those stories like that.
Yeah, powerful. Teja, and this might be our last question. I don't know. Maybe Juliet's got another one in her pocket, but I'm really curious if you were to advise your younger self or another person, let's say middle of college years or headed into college, and thinking, I'm going to grow up to be an entrepreneur, what advice would you give that person?
It's so funny because my advice to that person is honestly I wouldn't focus on being an entrepreneur, because I remember when I graduated college, people were like, what do you want to do? Do you want to go corporate, or do you want to be an entrepreneur? And I was like, absolutely not. I'm going to go get a job. I can't be looking for my next paycheck. I don't want to do this. And here I am today, building something that I never even thought was something in my mind. You change so much, and to go with how you feel the change is needed for yourself. When you overplan your life, and again, I'm an overplanner, and even still, I didn't plan as much as I thought that I really did. And I feel like my journey and my path just was exactly what it was supposed to be. There's no way to plan with the ever-changing digital space world in general. You just don't know what's going to happen next. There's so many pivots, and allowing the pivots to shape you and mold you into what you are is just the most important part.
Yeah. I hear a lot of self-trust in what you're describing too, that you do what feels like the right thing to do for you now, knowing and perhaps being open to whatever the next pivot might be, and seeing where that takes you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
You realize that, but yes.
Yeah, I think that, it's not for everybody, certainly, but the things that come out of being an entrepreneur, of your own personal growth, but also the contributions that you're making are so important. And so, you've developed something that I think is going to live on for a very long time, because it's so needed. And I'm loving the Digital Justice Lab. I want to know more. And I think what would be great is we will ask you back at some point in the next few months, and maybe for season 4 or maybe another season 3, but really to dig down into that a little bit more. And we'd love to have you do, help us explain this to young people, because I do think that this is such an important time for them to really understand. And so we have this election coming up in November, which in California, which to me is a very important election. And I think it's making me realize how important every election is. And so kind of let's work together and get that vote out. Susan?
Well, I just want to add that it's not just young people that need guidance and support on this. It's also, well, to be honest, people in our demographic who are seeing things change so fundamentally, like our newspapers that we used to rely on and the news that we used to you can't. And we need help. Everybody needs help figuring out how to navigate this misinformation, sources of information.
Very true, Susan. Maybe I'll offer those for online, actually.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. I mean, I get your audience and why you're situated the way you are and focused on what you're focused on, but so many others of us need help. Sorry. Anyway, in the food for thought category.
I love it. Teja, thank you so much. This was so awesome, as I knew it would be. Your grandmother is continuing to be proud of you, and I certainly am proud of you as well. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. This was amazing. You guys' questions were great. I always love when I feel very challenged in my questions and get to go a little bit deeper. So thank you so much.
That's so great. And so for our listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast. All the links to all the things Teja will be in the show notes, and there are a lot of them. She has had some amazing articles and write-ups about her work, and we'll be staying tuned to hear more about the Digital Justice Lab. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, Teja. Bye, Juliet. We're so glad you've joined us for this episode of Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast. We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks. In the meantime, please tell your friends and coworkers about us, and be sure to follow, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed listening. Secrets of the C-Suite is produced by Juliet Clothier, Susan Sutherland, and Brian Clothier. Original music is by Brian Clothier, and the podcast is inspired by leaders like you.